Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Qizhi. Coming up in this edition, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization says the Gaza Strip is experiencing the most severe food crisis in history of the Global Report on Food Crises. Former European Union chief Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier has officially become the new French Prime Minister. And Super Typhoon Yagi has brought powerful gales and heavy rain to southern China. We begin on the Middle East. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization says the Gaza Strip is experiencing the most severe food crisis in history of the Global Report on Food Crises. The agency has just released its mid-year update in New York. Jody Jacobs has more.
The FAO says 2.2 million residents in the Gaza Strip are in urgent need of food and what it calls livelihood assistance. The organization says the severity of the crisis in the enclave has intensified. Half of the population is considered at risk of famine. This is the highest category that the FAO lists and means that more than 2 out of every 10,000 people could die each day due to a lack of food.
The fact is that the diets of children in Gaza, the most vulnerable to severe malnutrition, are extremely poor. We estimate that over 90% of children are eating at best 2 types of food per day in, day out, for weeks or months.
It's not only war and conflict that's exacerbating food insecurity. Climate change is playing a role too. The El Niño-induced drought has worsened the food crisis in at least 18 countries. There was some good news though. The FAO reports that in at least 16 countries there were improvements in food security due to better harvests and stabilizing economies.
That was Jody Jacobs at the UN headquarters. The Chief of Staff of the Egyptian Armed Forces has inspected security measures on the border with the Gaza Strip. Thursday's visit came a day after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claimed weapons were being smuggled to Hamas through the border's Philadelphia corridor. Netanyahu has insisted Israel will not withdraw its troops from the border as long as it remains a smuggling route. Hamas has accused Netanyahu of trying to thwart a ceasefire deal with his stance. Jonathan Regev reports from Tel Aviv.
The Philadelphia corridor is becoming quite a sticking point, not only between Israel and Hamas, but also between Israel and Egypt. A lot of anger in both capitals on each other, so much that the Egyptian Chief of Staff was earlier today on the Egyptian side of the Philadelphia corridor, meeting the Egyptian soldiers and congratulating them for what he defined as a very good job in defending that border, preventing smuggling along that border. According to officials in Cairo, according to the Chief of Staff at the Philadelphia corridor, Egypt has blocked all tunnels running under the Philadelphia corridor, not allowing weapons or anything else to be smuggled, and of course not doing the same above the ground. According to the Egyptians, the fact that Israel is complaining so much ammunition has been smuggled into Gaza, that comes to show the Israeli failure, not the Egyptian failure. A lot of tension between Jerusalem and Cairo on this issue. Israel insisting that it has to stay in the Philadelphia corridor no matter what. According to Benjamin Netanyahu in press conferences that he gave this week to the foreign media, stressing that the Israeli presence in the Philadelphia corridor is a must for Israel, is a condition for Israel, and Benjamin Netanyahu for the moment insisting on it despite all of the pressure from abroad, from Egypt, from the United States, and from within Israel, from the families of the hostages, who are saying that the fact that Israel is insisting on this Philadelphia issue and not moving forward is basically leaving the hostages who are left in Gaza, leaving the living hostages to die there.
That was Jonathan Regev in Tel Aviv. Turning to Europe, former European Union chief Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier has officially become the new French Prime Minister. 73-year-old Barnier is currently the oldest Prime Minister in the history of the Fifth Republic. Ross Cullen has more.
The appointment of Michel Barnier is controversial because he comes from the centre-right Republicans Party, which only finished fourth in the election in July. The New Popular Front has been asking President Macron all summer to appoint a left-wing Prime Minister because the leftist coalition finished first in the election, but Emmanuel Macron refused to do so over what he described as institutional stability. Well, Michel Barnier faces a tough task now in the coming days, trying to form a coalition government and write up and then defend a budget by October the 1st. He is a veteran of French politics, first being appointed as a minister in 1993 by the then President Jacques Chirac. He also served under President Nicolas Sarkozy, and recently Michel Barnier has been working in the EU. He was overseeing the United Kingdom's exit from the European Union as the chief negotiator for Brexit. He becomes the oldest French Prime Minister, and he will be taking over from Gabriel Attal. The outgoing Prime Minister, when he was appointed, was the youngest.
That was Ross Culling in Paris. In Asia, Chinese Premier Li Qiang has called on China and Africa to work more closely to elevate economic and trade cooperation to higher levels. He said the cooperation provides strong support for jointly advancing modernization. The Premier made remarks at the opening ceremony of the 8th Conference of Chinese and African Entrepreneurs in Beijing. Zheng Songwu reports.
The conference is a major event in the Food Crises summit this year, and earlier Chinese Premier Li Qiang addressed the conference, and over 1,000 participants, including the leaders from various African nations, and 382 Chinese business representatives and 408 African business executives attended the conference. Representatives from China, South Africa, and Cameroon are exchanging their ideas on the promotion of industrial and supply chain, and more representatives from China, Rwanda, Zimbabwe, and Mauritius will share their thoughts on new industry. This conference is a good way to implement the proposal of Chinese President Xi Jinping on advancing modernization. At the opening ceremony on Thursday, Chinese President Xi Jinping said that China and African nations should jointly advance modernization that is justice, open, and win-win, as well as 10 partnership actions, for example, for mutual trade prosperity, as well as industrial supply chain cooperation.
That was Zheng Songwu reporting from Beijing. Staying in China, Super Typhoon Yagi has brought powerful gales and heavy rain to the country's southeast coast. The Central Meteorological Observatory has issued the highest typhoon alert. Omar Khan reports from Guangdong.
I'm here in Zhanjiang City, which is in the southwestern parts of Guangdong province. Now I'm going to give you guys sort of a view of what I'm around here. I'm on a coastal part of the city. This is a coastal city. We're in the downtown area, but that doesn't mean this Super Typhoon Yagi will not have its effects here. It is a super typhoon, arguably the largest and strongest that we've seen in the past decade. The trees being pushed and blasted by the wind, the waves crashing in, and the rain starting to come in as this day progresses. Obviously, you have personnel not only from Guangdong province but from Beijing being dispatched to the city, to South China, and looking to mitigate the after effect of what this super typhoon could bring. There have been ships that have been brought back into the dock, and as I mentioned, those rescue personnel, you have 2,100 coming to South China, over 70,000 emergency and disaster relief supplies shipped to this part of the country. Schools being closed, local transport coming to a stop, advisories on not going out unless you're in need of going to a hospital or in any sort of necessary situation.
That was Omar Khan in Guangdong province in southern China. In Africa, the Democratic Republic of the Congo has received the first batch of Mpox vaccines to tackle the viral disease that has spread rapidly across the country. Nearly 100,000 doses of vaccines donated by the European Union arrived in the capital, with more expected over the weekend. Chris Okumringa has more from Kinshasa.
A long-awaited arrival. The first doses of Mpox vaccines have reached the DRC. The jabs, manufactured by Denmark's Bavarian Nordic, have come at a time when the DRC has recorded the highest number of Mpox cases in Africa. More than 17,000 people have contracted the infectious disease, and over 600 others have died since the beginning of this year.
We have got a lot of assistance from the European Union and the Africa CDC to get these vaccines. We expect to receive a total of 200,000 doses by Saturday. We have received 99,000 today. We are now planning to roll them out to the most affected areas.
The vaccines were donated by the European Union, which has been supporting the DRC to tackle disease outbreaks.
It's a pox vaccine, and it has been used widely in Europe and in the US without side effects, so it's a very good vaccine, and that's the one we are delivering today.
A new, more infectious strain of Mpox that was discovered in eastern DRC earlier this year is reported to be causing the rise in cases in the country.
Now that the vaccines have arrived, health officials will have to step up their education campaigns to convince people to get the jabs, because a lot of misinformation has been circulating on social media about Mpox vaccines.
The government has formed a national task force to spread the word about health measures aimed at preventing people from contracting the disease. But the team has been facing serious challenges due to the country's poor road network and an ongoing conflict in the east. The DRC, like most African countries, has been relying on vaccines from foreign manufacturers. But some African leaders plan to change that.
We are also doing the transfer of technology to Africa. That one will start from next year to manufacture this vaccine in Africa. Then we'll increase the volume, will decrease the price.
DRC authorities are working with the World Health Organization and the Africa CDC to start rolling out the vaccines across the country. They plan to start with health workers and people living in areas like Equateur, South Kivu and Sud-Ubangi province that have recorded the highest number of Mpox cases.
That was Chris Okomringa in Kinshasa. Finally, in the United States, a boiling heat wave is affecting Southern California. Forecasters say the dangerous heat wave could bring some of the hottest temperatures of the summer to the region that has endured various extreme weather events. A series of landslides in the coastal community of Rancho Palos Verdes has triggered a declaration of state of emergency. Firefighters are also battling new wildfires in the north, fueled by dry and windy conditions. It is Tianshan has more from Los Angeles.
Just when Southern California residents thought the worst was over, another lengthy heat wave has taken hold on the region. Millions of residents have come under heat warnings and advisories by what the National Weather Service calls another dangerous heat wave. In places like San Fernando Valley, the temperatures might reach 46 degrees Celsius, about 115 degrees Fahrenheit. And it comes as scientists predict this could go down as the hottest summer on record across much of California. Several cities have mobilized their resources, setting up cooling centers in libraries, parks, and community centers, particularly for the most vulnerable. While the coastal communities are spared from the brunt of this heat wave, some places like Rancho Palos Verdes are facing another predicament: landslides. Residents have endured decades of coastal erosion. Heavy rainfall over the past 2 years has intensified mudslides and damage to infrastructure.
So late last month, a fire started after the ground movement caused damage to our electrical equipment. It caused a power line to fall to the ground and ignite a fire. That's the type of unsafe conditions we are dealing with, which is why, unfortunately, we had to turn the power off to keep everyone safe.
The governor has announced a state of emergency, mobilizing more resources at a time when many homeowners refuse to leave. Meanwhile, in Northern California, nearly 300 homes are under a mandatory evacuation order after the so-called Bear Fire exploded to more than 1,300 hectares in just a matter of days. The scorching temperatures are some of the hottest in years and could set more records. Health officials are telling people to take the right steps to stay safe.
That was It is Tianshan on a heat wave in Southern California. Now, recapping today's headlines, the United Nations says the Gaza Strip is experiencing the most severe food crisis in history of the Global Report on Food Crises. Former European Union chief Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier has become the new French Prime Minister. And Super Typhoon Yagi has brought powerful gales and heavy rain to southern China. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour a 1-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Qi Zhi. Thanks for listening.